Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of The Inside Agents. This is me, Nate Matthews, with my co host, Maggie Intim, and we are going to make an episode that is special. It's titled For the Players, and we're going to dive in to everything that players and parents and just fans of football should know about the agency industry and what we look for as agents. So, Maggie, how are you today starting off?
Well, Nate, I'm good. I mean, we're in the middle of, uncertain times, of course. I mean, obviously still dealing with the aftermath of COVID or post COVID or post or pre second part COVID, whatever you want to call it. It's uncertain, of course. And then business wise, it's kind of busy, right? Like we're in the middle of transfer window. So it's busy. It's busy. It's
It
busy.
is.
And how are you doing?
Um, Busy. There's 12 days left of the transfer window to get stuff
Hmm.
moving and shaking. So,
Yep.
you know, scouts get nervous, coaches get nervous, players get nervous, agents
Yep.
get nervous. Like
Yep.
it's just a frenzy. And as the clock is ticking down, I was watching Sky Sports the other day, and the clock's ticking, and then I'm just looking at it, and I'm like, holy smokes! There's really 12 days left. 12 days, a couple of
Right.
hours, some big moves going on. Some of the money that has gone in this transfer window surprising, especially with COVID. I wasn't expecting clubs like Chelsea to spend as much as they have.
I
But
mean, people always doubt Chelsea, but
yeah, but
Chelsea always comes through.
people all Roman Abramovich pulls money out of the woodwork. So
Yep.
it's
Absolutely.
very interesting. So first question I'm gonna ask you, Maggie, for players to know, what type of players do you look to work with?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think for me, I want players that are obviously they're focused on their game. They have a plan. That's big for me.
Yeah.
Gotta have a plan. Gotta have a plan for what you're doing on the pitch, and gotta have that plan for what you're doing off the pitch. So I look at those things. I look at their technical abilities, right? Like how are they as a player? Do they really understand the game? Because it's one thing to be a player, but it's another when you understand the game. You've been doing it for however many years, and then you also kind of understand the business side of things too. So those are like the key things that I look for when working with a player, and then also just them having a plan, them understanding what they want to do, um, understanding that the game, being an athlete, the lifespan of a soccer professional player is only but so many years. So it's like, do you have another plan B in the sense of plan A doesn't work out, or it does work out, but there's still something you want to do, maybe retirement phase. So looking at all those things.
That
How
that's
about you?
that is honestly, you touch on a great point, because a lot of agents or people in general just think, or even for the players, like this is for the players. A lot of players think that it's just their talent that would make agents want to work with players. And for me, like, it's very important that players want to do something else or have their mindset on something else, just because, like you said, this lifespan of a footballer is only so short. Like, there's not many professions where you can look at it and by the time you're 35, 36, you're calling it quits.
Hmm.
Like, that's the time where people's careers are usually peaking.
Yep.
So for players who I talk with and I want to work with, and I'm looking at them and I just ask them certain questions outside of football, like, hey, what are you interested in? And some I've heard say real estate, which is like, oh, one player that I work with told me, he's like, hey, like, I'm really interested in, like, when I become a pro player, I want to open like hotels. And those are things where I'm like, okay, you understand that after my career's done, I need to do something else with my life, as opposed to just being a talented footballer. Because let's be real, like, we've seen it so many times. There's talented footballers everywhere. And as an agent or even for a player, you always have to be 10 steps ahead, or like I always say, like, you have to be playing chess when people are playing checkers.
Yep.
Because for an agent, that helps us plan better for these players' careers after. Or say they have an injury and they're not necessarily on the field, we can help them in their recovery phase work on their other business plans. So, like I said, like players that I like to work with, the young ones I like to work with more than the older players, to be honest, because you can help mold the younger ones. Because with older players, I found that because of the industry that we're in, it's so demanding that they have had bad experiences or very good experiences with agents before. So they already have preconceived notions of how agents should work or how the industry should work for them. And if it's been a bad experience with agents, the older players are less trustworthy of newer agents coming on. So that's why me personally, I like the younger players. I like players that are creative, like you said. Like you have to, for me, you have to be comfortable on the ball. Being athletic is not good enough because if you aren't comfortable on the ball, I need to know that if I set up a trial for you or if you have a game, that I can trust that regardless of how athletic you are, you're going to understand the game and you're going to be comfortable on the ball. That's it. Everything else will follow. So like that's a very good point. You definitely need to be comfortable on the ball. You need to have a plan for yourself after football or during
Yep.
football,
Yep.
and you also need to understand like you have to. What I always tell players is love the game.
Oh
Like
yes.
don't do it because you're good at it. Love the game, and we can tell when players love the game versus when they do it without like any love or passion in it. Another, this is another segue, but what should players or parents look for in us?
Whew. Oh man, so many key points to that. But I will start with look for ethical agents. Look for agents that know and love the game, know and understand the business side.
Yeah,
The business side is key. I've come across some agents that they love the game, they know the game, but they're not too business savvy. And many people would say, well, isn't that what a football or soccer agent should know the game? Absolutely, you should know the game and you should love it, but you should also understand the business side of it. Because if you don't, that hurts your clients. That hurts when you're trying to get your client a move, a transfer, or you're trying to even just get your client signed. Or better yet, before even that, how are you getting the client?
exactly.
How are you signing that client to your company or whatever company you represent? So it's important to know the business, know the game, love the business, understand that this is not short term. This is long term. This is long term. The rewards and all of that good stuff, it comes with hard work. It comes with perseverance. It comes with persistence. So if I'm parents or I'm players and I'm looking at agents, I want an agent that is going to go hard. Now, what I will say is usually players or parents will say they want agents that come from the big companies, right?
Yeah,
And we're not really going to name them, but you and I know they want
yeah,
those guys that come from the top companies, mainly because they say, well, I've seen what they've done with such and such player, or I've seen what they've done with that player. And I say, yes, you can go with the big guys, but it's okay to go boutique style like us,
yeah. 100%.
because it's not just because we're younger, we know the game, we understand the business, but we're also going to give a lot more than those other bigger companies. We're going to give a lot more. So I would say parents, players, look for someone that's dedicated, look for someone that's hungry, look for someone that is going to ride for you and go to bat. That is the key. And look for someone that understands that you're not a meal ticket.
Yeah,
You're worth more than a meal ticket. It's the investment. That agent is going to make the investment to work with you and help build your career. I mean, there's so much more
yeah.
I can go into, but I'm gonna let you have
No,
the floor on that one.
that is so important. And what I would tell parents and players to look for is, you touched on a good point. It's like, work with, don't even worry about the agency per se, because I can tell, like, there's a difference. And I've had players ask me, what's the difference between working with you versus a bigger agency?
Yep.
And with bigger agencies, I know there's more quote unquote security, because there's a bigger roster that you may think like, oh, well, because I signed with this agency, my player, like, I have a better likelihood to have a better career, which isn't always necessarily the case, because I've seen I've seen big agencies don't necessarily have the time to check in like they should.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had a lot of players who start off with big agencies, because you brought up a good point. Bigger agencies see kids, some of them see kids as meal tickets.
Yep.
So what I always tell parents and players is, if an agent comes with money, they're going to leave with money. And if they don't leave with money, they're going to
That's it.
leave you. So make sure your agent actually, one, has seen your player play, because you'll find that a lot of these bigger agencies make it seem as if they're doing your child or you yourself a favor by working with them. And it's
Mm-hmm.
the opposite way around, because they'd be nowhere without you.
Yep.
So, which is what I always tell my clients all the time. I'm like, hey, listen, like, I work for you. Like,
Yep.
don't be afraid to ask me for anything, because it's my job to make sure your career is taken care of. Now, on the other hand, I do get where, like I said, players are like, okay, well, I don't necessarily want to work with a boutique, but it's like, if you look at the scope of football now, you would rather have someone who could invest their full or a lot of amount of time into you, or actually work with like the boss of an agency, versus working with a junior agent who you sign to some agency and you never see the person who's actually the face of the agency.
Exactly.
Like, also, transparency is very important as well, because parents need to, or players need to be able to ask their agent certain things and be able to trust their agent.
Yeah. It's
And
number one.
like you said, there's the difference between being an agent, a proper agent, and being a fan of agent, or the perception of, oh, all agents are bad and greedy, is, do you guys understand the business side of football? Because I always tell players, like, listen, it doesn't take a genius to spot talent on the pitch. It really doesn't. Like, you
Mm-mm.
can go see a player who's talented, approach him, hey, I want to sign you to my agency because I think that you're talented. Yes, we see that in you. Everybody's told you this most of your life, probably. But it's like, what's our plan for you? Do you have a plan? Like, I sit down with every client and I'm like, okay, here's a 1 year plan, 3 year plan, 5 year plan. And here's the steps that you need to take to get there. And you need to hold yourself accountable, and you need to hold your agent accountable too. If an agent doesn't have a plan for you or haven't seen you play, that's where you should raise questions as to, okay, how can you help my son if you don't have a plan for him? Because, like I said, big agencies have track records of doing things for other players, but that's not necessarily for you or your path that you even want to take. So if your agent doesn't even take time to help you set out a pathway for yourself, or have even set out goals or anything where they're like, okay, well, I've seen you play in this game or this game, this and this such, that's telling me as a parent, if you're not willing to invest not even money but the time to even go out and watch my son play, or you've only seen highlight videos of him, or you've only read that, oh, well, he was called up to the national team, so let me go reach out to him now, as opposed to, hey, like, I actually saw you play for, let's say, in the Generation Adidas Cup, you played against you did very well, then I know, oh, you have been watching, as opposed to, yeah, oh, my son just got a call up, so now all these agents are reaching out to me. So that's going to lead into red flags that players should stay away from.
Whew. Mm.
Or even red flags for you, both red flags for agents and red
Both
flags
parties.
for players, both parts.
Okay, so let me start with red flags that agents should look at with players. Sometimes a red flag for me is when a player reaches out and their first sentence is, I don't have an agent and I'm really good, or I'm really, you know, like this impeccable player. For me myself, I take that as a red flag because I'm trying to figure out, like, okay, especially if I'm familiar with you already as a player, that's one thing. But if I'm not familiar with you and I have to really investigate, and you start telling me that, I'm almost under the impression that you have an agent, but you're looking for a different opportunity. And it's
Not
like,
even that though, but
hmm?
also you've sent like a mass email to hundreds of agents.
Yep. And you could tell by the way the email is written that this has been sent to a thousand
Copy
and
paste.
one. Yeah, it's a copy and paste, boom, boom, plug and play. Um, and another red flag for me is when you reach out to an agent, whether it's myself, you, Nate, or just any agent, please, people, know who you're reaching out to, know the company they work for, know some of the players they represent. I'm not saying all, but know, have an idea of who you're reaching out to. Just because the person is an agent, it may say it in their bio or something. Understand what you're getting into, just like the same as vice versa. If I'm reaching out to a player, I want to know what I need to know about them. And anything else I need to know, I'm going to ask. So know that, at least for that part. I mean, more red flags for players. Look out for agents that, an agent that numerously, like they broadcast numerously that they're a licensed agent, 9 out of 10 times are not. That is a red flag. I myself had to like come across some folks that I'm like, why do they keep referring to that? Why do they keep saying that? If you're saying that so much that you have to put it out there to people to know that you're a licensed agent, 9 out of 10 times you're not.
I agree.
Because you're doing too much to have to explain that you are something that you're not.
Exactly. Like
Okay.
like that I would say is only brought up. It should only be brought up once. And the thing is, I don't even mention it because I feel as if people should know. If you have to feel in yourself, you have to let everybody know. That's a red flag because it's like, why do you feel the need to let everybody know? You know what I mean? Like, unless you're hiding something, like why? Like that's the that's one of the last things I would mention because it's like it's a given. You know what I mean? Like
And
it's a given.
it is because, and we spoke about this on the previous question about like things parents should look for, right? So that's another thing. Like if the parent feels some type of way, there are resources, like depending on which country you're in, the
Exactly.
federation you're dealing with, like especially the FA in England is very good. If you want to know, if you want to even have an idea of what agents to look for, they most all
Listen.
federations should list them. Not all do, but like the FA is very good at listing the
Yeah.
agents that are, and I mean updated,
Updated.
updated
No, the FA
frequently.
doesn't play.
And the FA also has even a resource that you can go to if you want to confirm that someone is a licensed agent, which is what I love. And so it goes back to an agent that has to continuously publicize that they're a licensed FA agent. You can just call up that number and they'll tell you whether that person is an agent. And if they can't find it in their database at all, like we're talking, even if it's 5 years ago, that person is not an agent.
Exactly.
So, um, so it's those things. I mean, other red flags when an agent, when an agent, I mean, I don't want to say brag a lot, but it's like a lot of times, yes, you could say bragging in a
Yeah.
way. 9 out of 10 times, that's a red flag.
Yeah.
Because they're doing too much
Okay,
of this.
agents that aren't humble, because
They're not
I
humble.
this
Yep. And then they try to make you feel like you said, you hit it on the nail when you said the agent kind of feels like they're doing the parents and the player a favor because it's like, hey, I got that on my list. Like for me, a lot of times it's not even a question. Like it only comes up about my other clients if you ask me.
exactly.
If you ask me who are my clients, I'm gonna go down that list and let you know because some of it is publicized, some of it is not. Um, I mean, there's so many red flags,
I
man.
think here's another thing that parents need to be wary of. Any agent that if you're under the age of 18, says they're getting you to Europe without a European passport, that's the number one red flag that parents should look out for. That
Yep.
and agents who are charging you to sign a deal with
Oh,
their client,
that's the one.
that is
So
the biggest
that's
red
both sides. That's
flag.
both sides. That's a player looking for an agent and an agent trying to go after players. If you're telling that player that you have to pay a fee to sign initially, so to register with the agency, you
Yeah,
have to pay a fee. And then if you want to terminate your contract, you have to pay a fee to get out of it. Let you players and parents know anything like that, stay away from that. There's a couple of agencies I can call out that do that, but I'm not gonna put it out there. Parents, players, stay away from that.
100
If an
exactly.
agent wants to sign your child or players, if they want to sign you, they
The money
shouldn't
comes from the clubs. It should never come
you
out of
shouldn't have to
pocket.
pay. Yeah, you shouldn't have to pay to sign up to be represented, basically. That doesn't
Yeah,
make any sense. You shouldn't have to pay to be represented. You pay once you sign, and whether there's a move or something like that made, then that's different. Obviously, that's where the compensation comes in. But to be represented or to be managed, you shouldn't have to pay a manager to manage you in the beginning.
exactly. That's not how it
So
works.
players, stay away from that. And agents, if you're doing that, that's whack. That's very
Exactly.
whack. That means, what that shows me is you're not about
It's
your
not
business.
genuine. It's not
Right.
genuine.
And for a player to even think about this, that that also shows you, like, if I sign with this player and we're both broke, basically, right?
Yeah,
And we get on, like, this agent is for me. Like, they're like, we're in the trenches. We don't have
exactly.
nothing. We don't have nothing, and we're working our way up to get there. But if I gotta pay you and I don't have the money, I'm struggling. It's like, that's how you're making your money, So
Exactly.
it's that's a
Those are
big red flag.
those are the red flags. Any agent that comes asking for money, you
Never.
cannot. That is a red flag right there
Yep.
because
Definitely report them, people. Report them for sure.
exactly.
Report them.
And like I would say, I'll touch on this with. So the English FA is very
Oh,
good.
before you even
The
get to
U.S.
that.
Federation is terrible with
Oh
that label.
gosh. Oh gosh.
So
Listen, we're not even gonna
I'll
get
give
into
parents
that.
the benefit of the doubt. If they say in the U.S. if they're licensed here, there's a good chance. Let me not say there's a good chance. There's a chance that they are, but that website has not been updated and is only updated twice a year. So bear with those agents because like they are registered. It's just a process, and with COVID as well, didn't help it
And
out
if
at
there's
all.
verification, right? And a lot of times, honestly, parents, players, if you want verification to feel comfortable for your needs, just ask the agent. Like, can I see something? Like,
Exactly.
can you show me something from the federation, whether that's the FA, the USA, Italy, Spain? Can I see something just so that you feel
You feel better
comfortable?
about yourself. Exactly.
Yeah, because there are a lot of fraudulent agents, and I feel bad. I really feel bad for a lot of players because the players just want to play.
Yeah.
It's their love of the game, and they don't know. Um, that's a red flag. Another red flag in North America, players. If you are coming from another country, let's get this straight once and for all. If you are playing for leagues such as USL, I'm speaking to the men in particularly. If you're playing for USL, the agents are not paid by the USL League. I'll say it again. The agents are not paid by the USL League. The agent's fee is coming from you as the player, only in USL. When you get to MLS, that is where the league deals with compensation for the agents. If an agent is telling you that USL is paying them, that's a part of a scam. Because what's going to happen is later on down the line, whether you make a move from one USL club to the next and they probably wasn't a part of that second move, they're going to hit you with an invoice.
Yep.
Don't fall for the scam. I know
Exactly.
I've had to help too many players get out of messes like that, especially when they're coming from another country because they don't
They
know.
don't know. They don't
They
know.
don't know.
100%. 100%. Now, now we're talking about red flags, misconceptions. What are misconceptions that fans have of agents, families have of agents, players have of agents? I have a couple. Like, one, the major misconception about agents, I would say, is that they are greedy and
Agree.
lazy.
Agree.
And like those to me, and they're paid too much because,
Can we add this to the list too?
go ahead.
That they always feel like the bigger agents are gonna always. I don't want to say the bigger agents are better, but
Yeah, the bigger eight. Yeah,
the super agents are better. Honestly, that's not always true.
yeah, it isn't. It isn't. It
So that
isn't.
could be a big
That is
misconception, a
another
big one.
major misconception, and I want fans, players, parents. We'll talk about each. Fans first. I want fans to understand because fans are fans of football clubs. They support their football clubs. They are upset when their players leave and go other places, and they always blame the agent. But I will tell you guys, for the most part, players are not leaving unless their agent decide unless they decide to on themselves. An agent cannot move a player solely. They
Right.
have to get an agreement
Absolutely.
from the club, especially in, like, say, MLS, for instance. They don't Agents don't do transfers. I want everyone to be clear on that. Agents do not do transfers. Agents facilitate the transfers after requests have been made by one, either the player or the club notifies the agent. But agents don't go out of their way to move a player, especially if their player is happy. So fans, that's one thing you guys need to understand.
That
Also,
might go for everyone, actually.
yeah, everyone needs to
That would
understand
go
that.
to everyone.
Everyone needs to understand agents do not facilitate moves on their own for players. Also, agents' jobs is not solely to get a transfer fee and relax. Because I think fans, and we see it now with the transfer window being open right now, everyone's so quick to want deals to be done right away. When in fact, it takes weeks upon months to get deals done unless it's transfer deadline day. That is one day where deals get done right away, or
Yep.
transfer deadline week, or the last 2 weeks is when things get done right away. So when you guys are thinking about the agent's job, and this goes back to the amount of money you think agents take, it's like, oh, well, this agent got paid this amount of money. First and foremost, only the super agents are collecting tens of millions of dollars off transfers, to be quite honest.
And
The
there's a big difference
There
between Europe
exactly,
transfers and North
and
America
North
transfers
American
and
transfers.
Canadian transfers. Please understand that, people. It's a
Exactly.
big difference.
So this goes down to, you guys, the misconception that agents are greedy. To be an agent in North America, there's no way you can be greedy, because if you see what agents are actually paid, it doesn't make sense. Now, in Europe, I get that players and parents and agents are making a lot of money, but you have to understand that the money that is in football, only a small percentage is even taken from agents, and it's not because of one transfer deal. You have to understand agents work 365 days out of the year and miss holidays to deal with their players or clients, make sure clubs are okay, like in the back end. It's not just about players playing and then the agents disappear. Like, agents have to set up everything from even the players' boxes at games to make sure everything's set forth and put forward. You have to deal with the agent's relationship with the club itself, like the players' relationship with the club. You have to deal with the coaches, you have to
Got to
deal with
deal
the
with
managers,
families too.
and their families on top of that. Then, of that percentage that you see agents take, they have to pay their lawyers, their advisors. Many agents pay other agents to help facilitate deals as well. So when you look at those fees and you think it's astronomical, agents only get paid once, twice a year, maybe. So that is a misconception that I want people to understand, that agents aren't greedy, and agents don't take money out of the game, and agents don't force players to move anywhere. Because if I have a client that's happy where they are, it's a lot easier for me to renegotiate a contract where he is than try to find him another club. Like, from an agent standpoint, if they're happy where they are, and you have to understand that they have a good fan base or like they're just enjoying life, there's no need for me to disrupt that. If the player is unhappy, then I'm going to do whatever it takes to get my player out of that unhappy situation and in a situation he's happy with. So that is where I want players to understand that. And there's also agents do play the bad guys because, like I always tell players, it's okay to blame me in certain scenarios because I don't want the club to have a bad representation of you, and I don't want your teammates to have a bad rep of you. So if you have to say in certain cases, yeah, well, my agent really is trying to force me a move like out, I get it, but that's not always the case. The player may be unhappy, and the agents may not be sure they can find him a move just yet. But it's easier for the player to say, "Hey, like, yo, guys, my agent's trying to force me out," as opposed to the real situation where it's like the player might not be happy, and that's just a part of our job that we have to take. Like, hey, like, for your own sake and your PR and like how you're looked at, we have to bite those bullets. So I just want players, fans, parents to understand those misconceptions. Like, we're not greedy. Some of us aren't greedy. Some of us are greedy. Majority of us are not. Majority of us do good work, but you guys need to understand, like, we're not going to do it for free because everybody else is getting paid millions and millions of dollars to get things done. Not even millions and millions of dollars, but if anything you do, you want to be fairly compensated and not limited to anything you do financially. Now, those are misconceptions that I have. Maggie, what are some misconceptions that you hear?
I mean, you touched on a lot of it. I think also too some misconceptions could be like people's perception of how an agent should be,
Yes, yeah,
of how an agent should be, the skill sets an agent should have. I think every agent has different skill sets. Every agent has
I agree.
different abilities, which is why there are, every agent is special in their own way, whether they're good or bad. They're special. Um, I think also too, so the misconception of how an agent should be, it's like, oh, you should be proper, or you should be this, or you should be that, or you should be a quiet agent where you don't speak up about issues, or you should be an agent that's vocal. Come as you are, right? As it says in the Bible, come as you are, be who you are, but never forget your role as an
Yeah,
agent.
your strong suits. Exactly.
Never forget your role as an agent. Never forget who you represent. So I feel like that's a big misconception that people feel like agents should just be this way. I mean, we're seeing it if we look at other sports, and there's some agents I could tell you that they're very they're vocal, right? They're very vocal. I mean, I'm one of them. I'm pretty vocal,
Yep.
when it comes to voicing my opinion on a lot of things, and sometimes it's different. Some people, sometimes even I forget that, damn, like, wait, I'm an agent, I can't say that. Or um some people are like, well, you're very vocal for an agent. Absolutely, because I know what I've seen over the years, and it's cool, but that's not me. And so I
Yeah.
don't know how to be anything but me. And I just happen to have the agent title attached to my name. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
And so it's like, I'm just going to be me. And it's like, either you accept it or you don't accept it. And so sometimes that could be a really big misconception. And I mean, you probably haven't dealt with this, Nate, but I have, in the sense of, the misconception that agents should only be male,
Oh yeah, for sure.
right? So when I talk to people, they're like, wait, you're an agent or are you the lawyer? No, I'm the agent. And it's like, wait,
Exactly.
like a football agent? Yes, a football agent. Yeah, there's a few female football agents. We're here, you know.
Yeah.
We're here, and yes, I'm a black woman. Yes, I'm here. It's like we're here, we're live. So that misconception that, oh, all agents should just be men, please, let's throw that out the window. It is
Exactly.
2020. It is 2020, and probably in 2030 there'll be 10 times more female
Hopefully.
football agents.
Hopefully.
Yeah, and hopefully one day there could be more female football agents than anything, than men. But I'm just saying, let's get that misconception out of the way. um and I think you pretty much touched on a lot of it, as far as like, the notion of that we're greedy, I will say some people could see this as a misconception that agents are supposed to do any and everything, right? So I've heard some agents say like, "I'm just, I'm not doing that," or "I'm not doing that," and it could be a misconception. It could be confusing. Once again, it goes back to be who you are. Be who you are, because when I think of an agent, I think of we're doing any and everything for our players. Because
Yeah,
at the end of the day, we work for our players. They don't work for us. We work for them. And what most people don't understand is, like, for someone like me, if my player doesn't have a team, if none of my clients have teams, I don't eat.
exactly.
So if my clients aren't eating or they're struggling, I'm struggling. I don't
Exactly.
eat. So in order for me to put food on the table, I have to make sure that my clients are good. In order for my bills to get paid, I have to make sure that my clients
Exactly.
have jobs at the end of the day, because it affects me. It affects me probably more than it affects them, because we're all in this together. But it's like, so that notion to say for some agents to feel like you are not supposed to do everything, that's kind of wrong. Like, you should want to go to war for your
Exactly.
players, because they make you who you
Who
are at
you
the end
are.
of the day in your career, you know?
It's true.
So
It's
that's
true.
how I see it on that side.
No, 100%. And touching on something else, what is your experience like about agent education and working with other agents and clubs in general?
Ooh, so agent education, when you say agent education, are we talking about from like a
Like,
theoretical
do you
side,
run
like
into a lot of
formal?
educated agents, or do you feel as if the industry needs more education?
The industry will always need more education. Always. Right? Because
Always.
it's an ongoing thing. And things change.
And it's evolving all the time. All the
Exactly.
time it's evolving.
So you're gonna always need education. Do I run into educated agents? It depends, because everybody's definition of educated is different. If I'm talking to someone like you, I know I'm speaking to an educated agent. There's some agents that I'm talking to that I'm like, wow,
Well,
how
yeah,
did how did you become an agent? Um, how? That's the
yeah,
number one question for me. It's like, how? You know. So education is definitely key. That's important. Um, and as far as working with agents from other places and clubs, I mean, it's interesting. The interactions are always interesting. I feel like a lot of agents are insecure. Um,
yeah,
a lot of agents are nervous that they can. I don't want to work with this agent because rather than collaborating, I want it all for myself. So
right,
yes,
yeah,
technically they can be greedy, and also too they just maybe want the credit rather than saying let's get this deal done for the player because it's for the best interest of the player, and it's a great look for the both of us as agents because it shows that not only did we make something happen for this player, but it will also show that it helps our brand, and it
exactly,
also shows that we're agents that can collaborate, and that's
exactly,
key, right? When you talk about football, when you talk about sports, that's what sports is. It's about being able to come together and collaborate and share some of the same ideas and the same passions for the love of the sport. And so to know that there are agents that don't want to collaborate, or to know that there's clubs that may not be interested in working with you, I mean, at the end of the day, you just keep pushing. You keep
yep.
pushing. You don't let that defeat you or stop you from doing what you're doing.
I completely, I would say working with agents and clubs is always very, it's different because everybody's different. It's like there are good experiences that you have, bad experiences you have. I would say overall, I've realized I'm gonna break it down by continent. Let me say.
Uh oh.
Okay, so for North America, I would say because of the way that the soccer dynamic is here, collaboration doesn't necessarily happen. And that is because I feel as if one, it's the soccer dynamic. Two, people don't want to collaborate and share because they feel like because it's just such a small territory, they feel like if they share with you, they're losing out as opposed to winning. So, like for me, and we talk about this all the time. I don't mind collaborating with other agents because you can never do anything by yourself, and it only limits you.
Mm-hmm.
So, I always see things. Well, like I'm a person. I like getting deals done. I don't care. You don't have to put my name on stuff. Give me the mandate, 50-50, done. Whatever. We move on. Like that's cool to me. But there are agents who see it like if I lose, like I'd rather take 50% of a deal than 100% of nothing. That's my philosophy with everything.
True.
There are agents who would rather have their players sit or be free agents or not find the club because they didn't do it themselves, as
Yes.
opposed to having an agent that's like, yo, like me, I'm always the type of, yo, I don't have all the contacts in the world. I have some very good contacts, but I know that you have contacts that I don't. So I'll always be like, yo, Maggie, like, listen, like, I have this player, yo, help me. Like, you know what I mean?
Yep. Yep.
50-50 is better than
And nothing.
100% of zero. Like, always.
See, but that's interesting. That's interesting that you say what you said about North America and like Europe, right? Because
Yeah.
let's get into it. Like, I have great relationships in Europe. I have found some agents to be easy to work with, and I found some that they tend to be on that nervous side.
Like, yeah.
Um, and then in North America, there are about maybe one or two that I can call on and we could possibly work on something together.
Yeah.
And then there are some agents in North America that it's just a matter of like not even so much of collaborating, but networking, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we should touch on too, as far as like just networking amongst agents. We got to do better with that. Um, yeah,
And
but
you brought up a
you're
good
hitting it
point.
on the nail. Yeah.
You brought up a good point about the insecurity of
Hmm.
agents agents because I think this is a misconception. Agents always feel as if other agents are trying to steal their clients based on what the media says about agents in
Number
general.
one. Yep.
Because
That's the number one misconception that we
the
need to even touch on.
perception
That's
is
that one.
like there are tons of players in Maggie. We talk about players all the time that we say in ourselves. There are players who have big agencies that reach out to both of us, where I would tell the player, I'm not even interested in managing you, to be
Hmm.
honest, but I will collaborate with the agent you have already. But the player may know, hey, my agent's not willing to work with anybody else. And I've had agents tell me where there's been a free agent this transfer window. I don't mind saying that there was a free agent. Club reached out to me, hey, we're willing to pay him like $1 million. We'll pay him $1 million. I reach out to the player. He's like, yeah, I'm still trying to find a club. I've been a free agent for months. I'm like, okay, well, you have an agent. Let me speak to your agent. Then your agent tells me, no, sorry, this can't happen. I I already have plans for the player, but he's been a free agent for 3 months. 2 months pass, 2 more months, so he's been a free agent for 5 months now. And then another club reaches out to me about the player, and I'm like, hey, just to let you know, you're still a free agent. There's another move on hand, but I'm not even gonna approach you now because your agent is not willing to split 50-50 or not even just help you find a move. Like it doesn't affect me. I don't even care to steal you. He can have you like players. Players need to understand. I'm not in the business of taking players from agents. I'm in the business
Thank
of
you.
getting deals done. And if I
Thank
can
you.
get a deal done for you and you're unhappy, I don't mind. Any agent could call me and I'll get the deal done. But agents, on the other hand, are afraid and think that, oh, well, he found a move and I didn't. So my player is gonna leave this agent for him. Where when in fact, I 9 times out of 10, I'm so particular with players I work with. I don't even want your player, but I do
Listen.
want to help you get the move done.
Listen. So you shared a story, and we've spoken about this before, where I've been in instances where there's, you know, players that'll reach out for certain things, and there are times where there may be opportunities, and it could be even off the field situations, right?
Yep.
Where, and this is a message to all agents, honestly, and just players and parents and fans and people. If an agent has relationships and they have certain things that you don't have, and they're willing to work with you to get it done for your player, be open and willing to work with that agent, because if you're smart, an agent like me or just a person like me, I'm going to work with you to also make that connection. Because
Exactly.
either it's been very hard for me to get to maybe that specific brand or company, so I'm going to work with you to get the connection, because guess what? Now if that company knows that, or they're being introduced to me through another agent who they have a good relationship with, green light.
Exactly.
That's the
It only helps
cosign.
me
That's the
become a better
cosign right.
agent.
That's the cosign right there. So I've in the past I've had a player that I've worked with, just on a certain opportunity, a marketing opportunity, and it was never mentioned that there was representation or anything like that. And that was a question that was asked, because I always ask players, always, just even when I was working in music, I always
Out
asked
of
artists,
respect. It's
like,
just
yeah,
out of
are you
respect
working
thing.
with marketing people? Are you working with whomever? So when they tell me no, I'm gonna just go off of that for the meantime. If I don't know anything about that player, or if I don't know, or if I've never seen or come across people, then I'm
Yeah.
gonna trust their word for it. So when an agent finds out that their player has done something with another agent on the marketing side, and you start to get a little nervous because you're feeling like maybe that player is possibly going to move to that agent. Word of advice, agents: don't keep asking the agent whether or not they're going to take your player. You need to be worried about asking your player that.
Player.
Talk to your player, talk to your client. You don't go to the agent
But you
and
know why they don't want to
insist that
have
the
that
agent is
discussion?
gonna is gonna
You know why they
do
don't want
that.
to have that discussion with their client? Because their client will tell them the truth about how they've been as an agent.
Absolutely. And so that's my thing to a lot of agents, right? So like when you say working with agents, like, to me, I'm the agent like this. Don't get on my bad side. You get on my bad side, you can never get back on my good side. I'm very big on relationships, and I'm also a person who pays very close attention to people that burn bridges.
Yeah.
And there's a saying, and I have this, you know, in my office: may the bridges I burn light the way. So if you are someone that wants to burn a bridge with another agent, or because you're insinuating something that is not even true, you never know what a person has, what a person can do, who they're connected to.
Exactly.
And once again, that's where that insecurity, that jealousy, starting to feel like it's a problem. I mean, to me, quite frankly, I'm open to working with other agents. I think more agents need to just get out of their feelings, honestly, and especially because if you see
Yeah.
people like myself and Nate, we're young, and if you older, don't feel intimidated. If anything, figure out how we can all work together.
Exactly.
That's the smart thing a smart agent would do. And if you also feel like you don't need to work with other agents, that's fine too. You can do what you do and have the other person do what they do.
Exactly.
But
But
just
this,
remember, everything always comes back full circle. That's one thing
it
I always
does.
say. It always comes back full circle.
Everything always comes back full circle, without a doubt. So that's my thing with, with player, like other agents. Don't, like, if you're doing a good job in anything in life, you would not worry about a client being taken from you. Do you see what
Bingo.
I'm saying?
Yep.
Like,
Absolutely.
that's why maybe I feel like I don't mind collaborating, because I feel like, okay, well, if you have a good relationship with your player, there's nobody who can come around off of one deal and just be like, hey, they're gonna jump ship and move to this agent now. Like, it doesn't make sense. If you built
What's
a good
meant for you will
relationship,
always be for
be
you,
for
right?
you. That's the
And but that's also why when we're looking at plays, especially for me, I look at loyalty. I'm very big on loyalty.
exactly.
Extremely big on loyalty. Anybody that knows me, loyalty is everything to me. And the moment a player shows me a sign of disloyalty, I don't want to work with you. And
Yeah,
that's also
exactly.
why I never rush to sign a player. It takes me like sometimes 3 to 6 months before I'll sign a player.
Oh yeah, it's a process to sign
Yeah.
a player,
Yep.
and that's another red flag too. Parents should be aware of agents, or parents and players. If an agent's trying to get you to sign on the dotted line right away, that is a red flag.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I get, like, for instance, if an agent meets you one time, and they're like, okay, well, thanks for meeting. Okay, well, here's the contract already. Like,
Too
that's a
soon.
red flag because
Too soon.
one, you should never assume that players are gonna sign with you. And I always tell people like, yo, after you meet with me, like go home, think about it. And if you decide you want to sign with me, I never have contracts on hand. I'm saying I'm gonna send it to you, and you guys read it and look over it afterwards, and then we'll
Yeah.
meet again. It's
Yeah.
never yeah, well, oh yeah, thanks. Like you consumed all the information I just gave you. By the way, here's the contract. Like sign the contract. Because
Yeah.
then,
It's
what's the rush?
not
There's
even
really
that.
no rush.
I tell my players to like interview other agents.
Exactly.
Interview other agents, or if there's, or better yet, I always tell them to make sure you know what you want in an agent, because I may not fit that description, but if someone tells me they're looking for specific qualities, I might be like, oh, you know what, Nate would probably be a better agent for this player than me.
Exactly.
So let me talk to Nate and make that introduction. To me, that's a real agent is going to do that. A real
Exactly.
agent is going to be like, hey, I'm going to introduce you to somebody else because I think they might just be a better fit, rather than saying, okay, um, you're not for me, so that's it. It's like you're on your own, you
Exactly.
know?
Like you're on your own. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, last. Well, this is a three-part question.
Oh wow.
It is advice that we have for players in different careers. So the first part is advice for managing like younger players. Then we'll go to like advice with like players that are like in the middle of their career, and then players like at the end of their career.
From a young age, for me, when it comes to managing players, the advice I give, and this is probably going to actually go across the board for the younger and the middle of their career, depending on where they fall, whether they're in college or first few years,
Yeah.
on the pro level. Um, from a young age, I like to work with the parents. Um, I just feel like because we have something in common. It's the child, the best interest of the child. So letting the parents know, like, hey, allow me to come in and do what I do as the professional. And
Yeah.
obviously, we would never step on each other's toes because you're the parents. But understand that we share the same goals. We want the best for the child, in terms of managing them. And then honestly, like just talking to the parents to kind of like reiterate what you want to make sure that player is doing. So whether that's training, eating right, obviously if they're still in school, like studying, making sure they're keeping up with their grades, but then making sure they're putting in enough time on the pitch to develop into that player. That's from a young side. Then when they get to that middle phase, like college level, if they decide to go to college or they're early in their career, same thing. It's like we're just staying on track. We have a plan. We're staying on track according to this plan. That's from that side. Once they're later on in their career, maybe even after, like if they decide they want to retire, if if they're still being represented by me in particularly, is sticking to that plan.
Yeah.
When I sign players, that's why it's so important to have a plan. I don't sign a player who doesn't have a plan. If you don't have a
Exactly.
plan, you can go somewhere else. No disrespect, but you can go somewhere else, because if part of that plan is to say, okay, I'm going to retire in X amount of years and you're still represented by me, let's say we're 10 years in and we're working together. Okay, we followed the 10-year plan. This is where we are now. You're now in the retirement phase. The plan was to work on the business. Well, while you were playing, we started the business, and now you get to kind of put more focus into the business.
Exactly.
So that's kind of like some of my management tips. And there's a lot more, but it's like that's the basis of it.
I agree. So for me with younger players, first and foremost, parents are key. Once you have the relationship built with parents or family in general, they're going to help you advise the kid because they know the player better than you ever will. So the relationship with the parents are key. Also, for players at a young age, love the game. Like literally love the game that you play, and don't worry or don't fear that, like don't worry about the contracts, the money, all the endorsements, all of that. Don't don't focus on that right now. Like literally focus on becoming the best player you can, and focus on trying to find playing time, because that is a key in your development. At the younger age, just focus on getting with the first team or like the second team and playing. Don't worry about endorsements. Don't worry about contracts. Don't focus on money because the money will come. Because you don't want to be one of those players where you get the contract early on and you collect a lot of money. But this is my thing. I always make sure before young players sign any contract that there is a pathway for you to become a pro that's realistic, like with your club. Like if your club doesn't have a realistic pathway for you to be a pro, don't need to focus on signing a contract right away. You can wait it out and then weigh your options because like we said, if you're a young player between the ages of 16, 17, 18, even 19, if you're between 16 and 18, you necessarily can't go to Europe on the North American side and you don't want to ruin your college eligibility by signing too early. You can weigh your options and say, okay, well, if let's say for instance, my club doesn't have a USL or second team, does it make sense for me to be 15, 16 signing a pro contract when I know I'm not ready? Also, don't worry about what your other teammates are doing because everyone's situation is different. If you love the
That's a
game and
big
you
one.
train 100% and put your all into football, the money will come, the endorsements will come, the sponsorship deals will come. Just focus at that young age of building your foundation of like one, try to build your individual brand up as much as possible through like social media and stuff, but also focus on your game because once you focus on that, everything else will follow. Now, if you're in the middle of your career, that is when I will say money starts to matter. Money matters. Like when you're in the middle of your career, let's say you're 3 years into being a pro, or you're starting 11, or not even, maybe you have like a roster spot, like you're one of the top 18 players at your club. Focus on getting like your business in order. Like focus on your finances, what you want to do after the game, focus on getting your playing time, and also focus on making sure you put yourself in the best position after your career is done. Like once you're in the ages of 25, 26, 27, focus on collecting as much money as possible and saving and doing get collecting other assets because one, you're one injury away from being done, and two, at that age there are younger players who if can replace you if you're not like a well-known name. There are younger players always coming in, so make sure that you have your finances in order. The older you get, you have to start thinking about like your legacy as a football player. Like if you've accomplished everything you want to accomplish, if you followed your goals, make sure you do that. But also make sure like as well that you collect, you have contracts that last longer than they should because you always want guaranteed money at the end of your career. Like the 1 year contracts that end up happening when you're like 30 years old are really detrimental to your like lifestyle after football. Like don't jump from club to club to club to club. Literally try to focus on your legacy at that point. And you should have, if everything followed suit, you should be able to know exactly your career path and how agents can help you. Like, say you're like, okay, well, I want to get into like fashion and design. You should have started creating things while you were younger to help put you in that pathway. Real estate, investments, all that other stuff, because you're going to realize once you're 30, once you're 28, 29, 30, 31, your career is big. It can go at any moment. So try to sign a longer contract, try to take as much money as possible if you can, or if you're comfortable where you are and you don't mind like just being like a squad member, make sure your life is at that stage is you're comfortable with where you are and where you want to be.
And those are some good points. I agree, 100%. What I what I feel like we didn't really touch on is players understanding the process, right? Like everything has a
Yeah,
process to it. And because this episode is, strictly for players, the process is A to Z,
exactly.
and you want to go through A to Z. I find sometimes some players want to go from A and just jump to Z and miss everything from B to Y, and it's like
Yeah,
that's the best time to go through everything. And I use that as an example of this. There are some players that have played maybe USL 6-7 years, and they want to go to MLS, and they could be older. And it's like, wait a minute. Like, I'd be a bad agent if I didn't tell you the truth. Like, it's not realistic.
Yeah.
Uh, Understanding what MLS looks for, but then you got to ask yourself too, what do your stats look like? Have you been consistent every single game? Have you consistently made player of the month, player of
Exactly.
the week, consistently?
Exactly. It's true.
So
Play
it's
that is
like,
so true. That is a very good point, and I'm so glad you mentioned it because I find that players, like you said, everyone wants to jump from A to Z, and nobody like players don't necessarily have a process. They see, okay, I want to be here one day, and I got to
yep,
make $1 billion next week. Like my next contract has to be worth $100 million.
yeah.
Where
Or
it's
they
like
tell, or they
I
tell you
always
like
tell
they're ready to
players,
level up, and it's like, okay, you can
exactly,
level up, but you're gonna level up within USL. You're not gonna level up to
exactly.
MLS. Let's be
Like
realistic.
for that's such a great point because you also have to look at where you're playing and where your spot is on your squad.
Exactly.
If you're
Exactly.
playing, let's this is anywhere like if you're playing in the let's say USL, you're playing USL 1. You're young, you're playing USL 1. You're there 2 years, 3 years after college, like every player needs to look at and your agent needs to help you with this. Look at your ceiling. Like for me, I like have a Excel chart of where I see each player that I represent and what their ceiling is. And if you like say you're 26 and you've been in USL championship, the likelihood of an MLS squad picking you up is very unlikely. But that's not to say, or they can pick you up, but they won't give you the money that a US like a higher tier USL club could.
Bingo. Yep.
So
That's it right
that's where
there.
you have to weigh your options and don't necessarily focus on leagues. Like focus on your playing time and your money. Like
Yep.
for instance, if you're in the let's say you're in second division in France and you can go to like say you're 28, 29, 30, and a club in let's say Russia, Qatar, or Saudi Arabia is going to offer you crazy amounts of money to go. If you're not going to win the Champions League or you're not going to win Ballon d'Or, you're not going to be in the World 11, go there and collect your money
Yep.
because
Make your money and make an impact, because
exactly.
I don't understand sometimes with players that I have to, I'm that transparent agent. And I'm gonna tell it like it is. And a lot of times players might look at me like she's crazy, she's this and that. No, I'm
Yeah.
gonna tell you what the other people are afraid to tell you. I'm gonna tell you what the real deal is. If you're like you said, if you're not gonna win Champions League, but I'll give you an example because I went through this with a player in France, in
Mhm.
particularly, right? He wasn't even in second division; he was in first division. But he felt like there was a huge offer from a Middle Eastern club, first team. Um, they were, I think, like in the
Yeah.
top two teams of that division. They were going to pay him a shitload of money, but he
Ooh,
insisted on wanting to come to MLS. And I'm like, look, you're not going to
you're not going to
get
get that money here.
you're not going to get that money there. And if you're smart, you'll go to the Middle Eastern club, because you could play 1 year, 2 years, however long the contract was for, which it was kind of short term, but you could have went killed it, then made your way over to MLS.
Exactly.
Sometimes people are not thinking about the strategy. They're not thinking like, oh, strategic, right? I'm a strategic type of thinker. So I'm thinking about, okay, I can go here and make that move. Or like you said before about USL and MLS. Yeah, the MLS club might pick you up. You might end up being a reserve, but you're not going to get the playing time that you would have went to a top tier team. And you're
Exactly.
probably going to get paid the same amount as you would have if you went to a top tier USL club, where you could have actually been getting minutes. That's the key. You're
Exactly.
getting minutes versus sitting on a bench. You're
Exactly.
sitting on a bench and you're collecting the same amount, but you're just sitting on a bench where nobody really knows you. Where chances are, because they didn't really see you produce, who's to say next season if you'll even still be there?
Exactly.
They
Like,
might
and
even say we're going to move you to our USL club, where all in all you could have just went to a top tier team and have been able to produce even more, build your name up. So another
exactly.
thing, players, I need you guys to understand too, it's so important to build your brand. There's like, it is very rare that these major big leagues are going to just sign you when there's not really
A
much
social
of a
media
name.
presence, to be
Yeah.
honest.
And not even just social media, but it's like there's not really a buzz around you.
Yeah.
Like, yes, we have seen some leagues sign some players where we're questioning, like, what the hell? But,
Yeah.
there's different reasons. Maybe they've heard of them in different instances that we haven't. But I know firsthand, especially in North America, there's a lot of USL players that want to go to MLS, for example. And it's like, let's just be real. There are even some USL players that have played in MLS, but they got knocked down to
Down.
USL. So what about even talking to those players that can share their experience? And for some
That's
of those
another
players,
thing.
it's been even harder for them to get back into MLS.
You bring up a good point, and I will tell players this all the time. Like, we talk about collecting your money, but you need to understand that if you collect your money, don't expect to go back to certain places. Like, for instance,
Yep.
if you're in Europe and you decide you want to go to the Middle East, don't expect to come back to Europe and play in the Premier League, because it's not going to happen. It's
Yeah.
not.
It's
Like, you
very
just,
rare.
like,
Very
players
rare.
need to look at like the strategy behind things. And also, players in Europe, if you go to Europe, you go to MLS, the chances of you going back to Europe, slim to none. If you're in MLS and you're a player, you go to USL. What, even if you dominate USL, if you were in MLS and you go down to USL, the likelihood of you getting back into MLS is very slim to none. Like, so that's why I always tell players, if you're in the top league, stay in the top leagues as long as you possibly can, because once you start going left, right, and center, it's like, I don't want to say it's only downhill, but you end up on a slippery slope to try to climb up again. Stay at the top as long
I
as possible. Now, if you
I know a
decide,
couple of MLS
if
players that have
exactly,
played about
if you're
almost 10 years,
true,
and they couldn't even get picked up as a free agent. And so they got picked up, but they went down to USL.
exactly. So it's like, if you decide, I always tell players, if you're at the stage in your career where you want to collect your money, go with it, but don't expect to play at higher level clubs at that instance. Now, the younger players, I will never tell you just collect your money if you're 22, 23, 24, and you end up in Saudi Arabia or you end up in Qatar playing, because it's like,
Yeah,
no,
no.
that's not your path. Go and fight in Europe. Go fight in Europe. Go fight in MLS. Go fight those leagues and try to make a name for yourself. But if your clock's turning 27, 28, and Qatar comes calling, you might as well just go and collect your money, because that's a whole
I have a
completely
question
different
for you
language.
regarding that. So what if you're like 27, 28, you've been in USL, you want to go to MLS, but you're not getting that call from MLS, you're not getting the call from European countries. What do you do at that point?
I'll bring up a prime example. So there's this player, Dekite. Dekite was on the USL Team of the Year last year, second team as a center back. Center back, right? USL Team of the Year, center back. This guy, I've seen. Dekite is such a good player. Like, this guy never gets injured. He's from Senegal, so I've linked up with him a couple of times. So I was helping him find a move. We got an offer from MLS sides. MLS sides offering bare minimums, where I'm like, Dekite is a better player than what you're offering him. Another USL club offered him $6,000 a month, a higher tier USL. He played for Tampa Bay Rowdies, but a higher tier USL club offered $6,000 a month. Um, Expansion clubs offered him contracts as well in the MLS. But then I was talking to Dekite, and he's like, "Yo, like, I'm 28 now." He's just like, "Yo, forget it. I'm gonna go to Vietnam." He's playing Vietnam, making three times the money he would have made in USL, but he's completely fine because he's playing all the time. It's an easier league for him, and he realized at that point, he's like, I'm not gonna chase this MLS dream, and it's not worth me playing in the MLS for minimums when I can
So
go
they were
to Vietnam and make the money that I deserve.
Absolutely. So MLS, were they offering him? So they were offering him the minimum. Was he coming on as a starter, or was he going to come on as like a reserve?
He was gonna come on as a reserve.
Oh yeah, no, he made the right decision. Because
So,
yeah,
but the thing
yeah,
is,
I don't
I'm
blame
gonna
him.
keep it real with you guys. The clubs that offered him the contracts, he would have been starting, but it's not worth the reserve salary. It's not worth it.
Got
It
you.
would. You see
Okay.
what I'm saying? Like they're like,
Mhm.
oh yeah,
Agree.
they try. Like you know how it is. Clubs
Mhm.
say because you're from USL, they're like, oh, we don't think you're gonna start. Da, 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 da. But looking at these squads now, I'm like, he would have started for sure because your back line's leaking in goals left, right, and center. Like, you know
Yep.
what I mean? So for him, I'm glad he realized, and I'm glad he knew his worth because we were talking about it in December, like early December. He was like, "Yo, like, yeah, I mean, I may go to MLS," and I'm like, "Yo, bro, like, don't rush to sign with an MLS club where I'm sure you can get money elsewhere." And he's making his money, like he's
Man,
making
that's
three
listen,
times
Nate. That's
more.
the. Let me tell you something. That's the topic right there, because we got players in college that are trying to figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
We have players in college that are trying to figure out. Okay, I want to go to MLS. Some of these guys could possibly play in Europe, honestly, but I feel like they don't know the options. And some of them do. They know the options because of their coaches and things like that, and the coaches helping them and stuff like that. Um, but a lot of these guys are trying to figure it out. And then there's just guys that are not in college that either they're from the academies and they're trying to figure out what their next steps are. And it's a lot to do it, because I feel like somewhere between USL, MLS, Europe itself, there's got to be some type of pathway that can help, because there are some USL players that can play in Europe that
Oh
probably
yeah,
won't
for sure.
even make that jump to MLS, but instead they can go to Europe,
And
and
that
we've seen it.
and also people need, that's why I say people don't need to necessarily worry about the leagues they're playing in,
Mm-hmm.
because you would be surprised. There are some countries that you guys can go to that are at the same level of USL that will play three, four, five times more. Like that's why, like, don't necessarily worry about, like, MLS USL is a completely different ballgame than Europe, because European
Oh, yeah.
clubs are all paying you guys, like they're paying ridiculous amounts of money in leagues that you would think, oh yeah, that's a bad league, but it's like that league's paying me three, four, five times more than what you're making at second division. Like for instance, before COVID started, let's take the English Championship. English Championship clubs are paying players eight, nine, $10,000, like easily. Like clubs that are getting relegated to League One, where it's like you're making 10. It's like some are making $20,000 a month. Some players
Big
are playing
facts.
in Croatia, making $25,000 a month at mid-table clubs. There are some
True.
players that are playing in Switzerland, making $25,000 a month, and then like second division, first division, where they're making like good amount of money, where it's like you don't need to be stuck on playing MLS, because if you think about MLS, I guarantee you there are second leagues in Europe that are paying players the same amount that MLS is paying their roster players. Like not their designated players, but there are clubs in Europe that you're like, man, I never heard of this club before, that are in second division or even first division, like lower level, that are paying players double what they would make, and they just don't even know, or think that
Absolutely.
if I'm not playing at a top club like Bayern Munich, or I'm not playing at like Bundesliga or whatever, that it's not worth it. But little do they know, those clubs are willing to pay hundreds of
Very
thousands
true.
of dollars.
Very true.
Yep.
Well, I
That's
mean, at
it.
the end of the day, players, we hope that players, parents, fans, we hope that you all learned a lot from today's episode. I mean, once again, we thank you for joining us on the Inside Agents. Once again, I'm Maggie and Tim, joined by my co-host.
Nate Matthews. And guys, honestly, I really hope that this educated you guys. You guys reach out if you guys have any questions about just the agency industry overall. If you guys are looking for agents, like
Yeah.
hopefully these episodes make you guys realize there are good agents out here.
Yep. We're
And
probably two of the most accessible agents, honestly, out there,
oh
because
yeah, for
there's
sure.
other agents that they won't even answer emails even. So it's like, guys, don't feel like you can't reach out to us. We're on social. We're on Twitter and Instagram, the Inside Agents. So please reach out. Reach out with any
Exactly.
questions, DMs. And we thank
Yes,
you
sir.
once again for tuning in to another episode of the Inside Agents. And we will be back with another episode next week.